Good afternoon in New York and Eastern North America. Good morning, Los Angeles and the western parts. Good evening in Yerevan, Armenia, Aleppo, Syria, Nuremberg, Germany, and Europe and Africa. And welcome whatever time of day or night for all who are joining us from all corners of the world. I'm Yael Danieli, founder and executive director of the International Center for Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma, ICMGLT for short. Thank you for joining our webinar on History and Identity Erasure, Generations of Armenians Worldwide Under Attack, again and again. The recent exodus of Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh and the harrowing reports of ethnic cleansing in October 2023, the global Armenian diaspora is in shock and profound grief, once again confronted with the weight of intergenerational trauma, of loss of historic lands and rich cultural heritage, echoing the atrocities of the 1915 genocide and intensifying fears of cultural erasure and identity loss. As the world bears witness in advance of April 24, which would be the 110th anniversary of the genocide, the International Center for Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma convenes this webinar to examine with leading multidisciplinary Armenian international scholars and advocates the enduring legacies of their historical trauma and resilience, and impress upon the international community the urgent need for global solidarity in recognizing and protecting vulnerable populations and in celebrating and preserving cultural heritage. This webinar would not have happened without the total dedication of ICMGLT's Advisory Council member, Peter Pahlavanian, who is always there to update, widen our Armenian network, and ensure the highest quality participation, as is evident in today's webinar. Your moderator, I am a clinical psychologist, traumatologist, victimologist, and psychohistorian. Having developed the first program to help Nazi Holocaust survivors and their children in the 1970s, I have devoted much of my career to studying, treating, writing about, and preventing lifelong and multi-generational impacts of massive trauma worldwide, to ensuring victims' rights, the rights of future generations, and to reparative justice. For me, psychohistory explores history as it is lived today, not only as a series of dates and events and names, but as it shapes our choices and ways of being now. Today's first speaker is Dr. Gurgen Petrosyan, who holds the position of Senior Officer for International Criminal Law at the International Nuremberg Principles Academy. He teaches international law and international criminal law at Erlangen, Nuremberg, Ingolstadt, and at Yerevan State Universities. Additionally, he's the chair of the German Armenian Lawyers Association. In addition to being a close friend, Gurgen is on the Advisory Council of the International Center for MultiGenerational Legacies of Trauma. Today's second speaker is the amazing Lina Hovhannisyan, a community leader, attorney, and activist in Nevada. Lina has blazed the trail for political activism in Nevada and beyond as Anka Nevada co-chair, Lina, you'll have to tell us what WR, board member and recipients of Anka's 2023 Visionary Activist Award for her leadership in advancing Armenian genocide recognition by co-drafting and passing the Nevada Holocaust and Armenian Genocide Education Bill in 2021. Her career began in litigation and as a federal attorney for the United States District Court in California. From Yerevan, Armenia, we are joined by Michelle Balian, co-founder and co-host of Mer Hersonel, Our Heroes podcast. Mike is a 3D dimension artist specializing in sculpting and fabrication. Most recently portrayed Judah the Hammer in the web series Warrior Saints, bringing history to life through both digital art and performance. A former player for the Armenian national ice hockey team, most recently, Michelle relocated to Yerevan, Armenia. Last, we are blessed with honorary Gasia Abkharian. Appointed to the Orange County Superior Court in 2014, presiding over various criminal and juvenile matters, Judge Abkharian co-founded the Center for Truth and Justice, as well as received in 2002 the Alba Whitkin Humanitarian Award from the California Judges Association. Earlier, a deputy public defender in Orange County following United States national and several Armenia national humanitarian development and international political roles with the Armenian Assembly of America and Armenia's highest leadership. She earned her BA in political science from the University of California, Irvine, and her JD from the University of La Verne College of Law. We have an hour and a half for the webinar, though we've been known for a most engaged audience who keeps us longer. Each of our presenters will speak for about 8 minutes. After an interchange among us, I will open the floor to questions or brief comments from the virtual audience, which also has a few surprises today. We will then conclude with last words. Please use the Q&A and chat function, and we will do our best to respond to as many questions and brief comments as we can. Feel free to direct your questions to particular panelists or to the full panel. I now have the great pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Gurgen Petrosyan. Gurgen, the floor or the screen is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Yael, for this kind introduction. And also thank you very much for giving us Armenians a floor to speak at this very well-known webinar about our pain that follows us already for 110 years. We're indeed approaching 110th anniversary of Armenian genocide. And indeed, this is a problem that still is alive with us. In my speech, in my short speech, I'm going to concentrate on, especially on two aspects. One is the hate speech as such, and secondly, the current developments that are ongoing with the between Armenian and Azerbaijani authorities. Yeah, you have mentioned already the Holocaust. Indeed, this is something that the victims of mass atrocities after 17 and after 100 years later are having with them. They are experiencing the same anti-Semitism. They are experiencing the same hate as it is, unfortunately, is present today. The October 7th was another example of the anti-Semitism, and similarly, the war that happened in 2020 and ongoing activities that are going against the Armenians are another example that there is a hate again towards Armenians. We as Armenians in diaspora are witnessing different anonym hate calls. We're witnessing different threats by different Turkish individuals and also the Azerbaijani authorities. This is something that is very, very much present. And unfortunately, after the 2020 war, the war crimes that have been committed by the Azerbaijani soldiers, by the Azerbaijani authorities, became some kind of a sticker that we know in our social media platforms. The stickers that we send sometimes as a memes or sometimes as some kind of funny smileys that can be sent around. For the Azerbaijani authorities, it became something to make a fun of the Armenians being beheaded or being mutilated. These kind of stickers are being sent to different Armenian individuals around Germany through anonym numbers and anonym calls. This is the 21st century, where we used to live in some kind of humanity after establishing some kind of human rights standards or after the Second World War. But it appears that this is not the current way how we need to move on. And receiving these kind of stickers, it's a clear threat. It's a clear sign that the Armenians are being threatened as soon as they appear in front of the Turkish or Azerbaijani soldiers. In 1915, 110 years ago, during the First World War, there was an ideology known as Pan-Turkism and Pan-Osmanism. After the First World War, it appeared that maybe this ideology is over. Similarly to anti-Semitism after the Second World War, it's still there. And again, similarly, the Armenianism is still, Armenophobia, so-called, is still present. Armenia is a tiny country that is in between of Turkey and Azerbaijan. And according to this ideology, is to create a big Turan, to have a big, let's say, Turkish-speaking nationalities connected to each other. And one of these hinders in between is the Armenian country. And step by step, through hate, through spreading the hate, or through different political steps, this ideology, after 110 years, is becoming partly to a reality. The first step was, of course, with Nagorno-Karabakh, the deportation of Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh. But with this is also not over. That on the deportation of Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh was only another step to come to this ideology of the Pan-Turkism. And unfortunately, the Armenians are still under this threat of losing the southern part of the Armenia. The whole concept of hate is not only in the society of Azerbaijan, but it's organized, it's a big policy from the Azerbaijani authorities, coming from the central government, coming from the mouth of the president of Azerbaijan, mentioning Armenians as dogs, mentioning Armenians as the enemy, mentioning as a coronavirus, in order to target Armenians as a person who should not live. And these kind of beheadings are an illustration of these words, because the soldiers or the usual and random citizens of Azerbaijan, they think that if their authority, if their president mentioned these words, this for them should be as the way how to continue their work. There are clear connections between the Armenian genocide that happened 110 years ago and the acts and activities that are being committed by the Azerbaijani authorities nowadays. Now we speak about the so-called peace negotiations and peace, so-called peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And in order to go to peace, Armenia is ready to take a lot of disadvantages. But even in this matter, the Azerbaijan is not trying to sign the peace treaty. Armenia is ready even to take the proceedings before International Court of Justice, which me personally as a lawyer, I cannot support in any way. But the Azerbaijanis threat that is ongoing in order to take over the southern part of Armenia, or even maybe the whole Armenia, we don't know what kind of policies and strategies are being developed by the Azerbaijani authorities. It's a clear sign that Azerbaijan does not want a peace between the Azerbaijanis and the Armenians. It is really very, very sad that we are living in 21st century. We're witnessing a lot of hate around the world, in Israel, in Armenia, in different parts of the world, Sudan, Myanmar, Syria. And instead of trying to find solutions and negotiations among each other, not to kill and not to hate each other, we are still continuing the methodologies of the Middle Ages. And the problem is the ignorance of international community on these particular problems, because this ignorance brings to the repetition of all the problems that are alive today. I hope I can dive a little bit more in the discussions on these particular issues, and also bring some historical examples how problematic this can be, connecting the Nuremberg and also the Armenian genocide together. Thank you very much, and I will pass to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gurgen, for sticking to the time, even a little less. So I'm sure you'll have a lot to add to the dialogue. And thank you for the multidisciplinary analysis. Lena, I can't wait for your presentation now. Please join
Thank you
us.
so much, Yael, for this honor. I thank you. We appreciate this platform. Thank you to my fellow panelists who are, so talented, and also to Peter Bahlawanyan for producing this and putting it together. It's really an honor. So building on what Gürgen has laid a beautiful foundation for what us as Armenians are facing, I have to say, since this topic is really about the multi-generational trauma, I think a lot of us have this, unspoken but spoken pain when we, that has kind of grown up with us organically since the moment that we can remember. And we talk about our Armenian heritage and our history. We've been taught about the Armenian genocide from a young age appropriate, but it's something that we've grown up with. And so it's a pain or a sense of injustice that's followed us throughout our lives. And so I think for me personally, it very naturally grew into a profession to seek justice through pursuit of studying the law. And I think that's been an ongoing theme throughout my life is the pursuit of justice for what's happened, a grave injustice, first genocide of the 20th century, and now, unfortunately, the first genocide of the 21st century. And I have to say that to watch the arc of injustice to come full circle is quite devastating. And if we harken back to the images of 1915, we think about our ancestors walking through the desert and being deported, forcibly deported, being killed, tormented, tortured, raped, and pillaged along the way through Deir Zor Desert. And we see that same iconic image being repeated in 2023 when the Artsaksis were forcibly displaced from Artsakh after the almost 10-month blockade. Which takes me to the deep pain that we feel is something that can also, how we deal with it as survivors or our families who are survivors of trauma, and stories that we've heard from our grandparents of survival. It's both difficult, but it also has an element of empowerment. And I think that's something that I have wanted to do in my own life. It has happened naturally, but I think now I feel very intentional about it. And it's to help to alleviate some of the pain and the suffering. So when the 2020 war on Artsakh occurred, there were about 5,000 soldiers that were lost. There were war crimes committed. There were videos, as you again mentioned, the torture videos of soldiers and civilians and women who were mutilated and you know, unspeakable horrors and just beheaded, killed on video. And I think that it was perhaps the first you know, live streamed genocide that happened in front of our eyes. And that image was blazed into all of our collective psyche. And I think the response to that from my end was that education and awareness has to be the response in order to, short of any, you know, the military campaigns, but you know, the law has to work on our side, and also education. And so I turned my focus on education. And in 2021, I worked with the Jewish community here in Nevada, and we worked beautifully together. We co-drafted and passed, we lobbied and passed a Holocaust and Armenian genocide education bill. It was a bill that had very important components of specific mention of the Holocaust, Armenian genocide, and there were other genocides as well that were mentioned, of course, in the bill. And also what's important that's come out of that is a subcommittee, which is now tasked with implementation of the actual curriculum. So that is something that was an empowering moment to counteract some of the pain of what was happening. But I think, you know, taking a broader stance and looking at it from a national and a foreign policy standpoint, I think our political activism is a very important component. And I think, you know, being an activist, I really look at it as three ways. There are three components to activism. And I think what it is really there has to be obviously a legal basis, a justification, and that could be through the international courts. The ICJ opinions played a huge role in the advocacy. When you're looking at the basis for the International Court of Justice opinions, they were based upon CERD, which is the Convention against for the Elimination of Racial and Ethnic Discrimination. And so that was a very important basis to show that this was a hate-based policy that came from the highest government levels of Azerbaijan. Erdogan, before he attacked, he helped in the collusion with Azerbaijan to attack Artsakh, he said, we must finish the mission of our forefathers, an intent that goes back 100 years, and then it is being episodically implemented. And so going to the response to that is that, you know, seeing there's a legal basis, there's a very important media component, which is showing and raising awareness. And I have to say that I think many of us felt that our genocide was invisible. It was not reported. It was underreported. We are severely underrepresented, not only on the national media, but also the international media. And the last part of this is also the the government relations, building the government relations where I've been able to tell our story and build a foundation of knowledge for our congressional representatives, so that when we ultimately ask for legislation to be passed and to be promoted, and this takes me to the Azerbaijan Sanctions Review Act. So there were two very important bills right now that are being spearheaded by a Nevada congresswoman, and are getting significant support. One is the Armenian Genocide Education Act, which is basically to promote and to budget $10 million of Armenian genocide education throughout the states. And very proud of that, to be able to take a state bill and then to elevate it to the national level. And then also one other thing that is unprecedented for our community through our congresswoman here in Nevada is the Azerbaijan Sanctions Review Act. And I think, as we all know on this panel, accountability or lack of accountability has been a major problem for why, Turkey has been able to get away with a mass murder of an entire race, because there was never any accountability. And so accountability is what is the basis for the Azerbaijan Sanctions Review Act. Within that act, one of the important things that I was able to, have a voice in was to name the Artsakh leaders, specifically name them, including Ruben Vardanyan, personal friend David Babayan. These are leaders now who are being held hostage in Baku prisons and being displayed under Stalin-esque style sham trials. And they've committed no crime except to be ethnically Armenian and to have been leaders of Artsakh. And so I think, I see the part where having legislative language in our bills is very important leverage point for accountability. It raises awareness, it raises our leverage, and it also allows us to hold Azerbaijan and other perpetrators accountable. So on that note, I would like to conclude and say that, I think political activism, legal activism, media, everything we're talking about on this panel all works together to empower us not to be victims again and again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I put in the chat what I promised you earlier. Some of Florida's education initiatives. And I'm sure the audience would love it if you can put in the chat, the bill or whatever information you can add so people can really get into it on their own time. It's such an amazing parallel achievement. And using education for accountability and the the multidisciplinary view, I guess, imbues everybody here for now. Thank you very much, Lina. And now from Yerevan, Michelle, please.
Hi, everybody. I first want to say I'm extremely honored to be on this panel with every single one of you, highly esteemed ladies and gentlemen. I almost feel out of place. I know, but I shouldn't. But I'll get to that in a second. But anyway, taking a very humble approach to this. So a little bit about myself. I came from a family who migrated from former Soviet Armenia back in the mid-70s. So I was born and raised in Los Angeles. Grew up a very American Armenian, more American than Armenian, I have to admit. And the reason I'm prefacing what I'm going to get to eventually with this, because I think what ended up happening, even though everything was kind of well protected, our heritage, our culture, everything within my family at home. We spoke Armenian. My brother and I grew up in Armenian schools. We spoke Armenian. And even then, growing up until my later teenage years, maybe even until my early 20s, I kind of pulled away from the Armenian world, not because of anything specific. It's just kind of growing up in that LA culture, didn't really mix too much with Armenians and whatnot. It just naturally worked out that way. But anyway, I think at some point, and the three most important things, let's say, in my life were always art, history, and sports. I've always been a history fanatic my entire life. Always studied history as you know, in my teenage years, even though maybe I was bad at other things in school. I have to admit, I'm not going to come off as a scholar. But the reason I mention these things is because when I started to evolve in my career and in my athletics and whatnot, I grew up playing ice hockey my entire life. I think it was in my mid-20s when I was asked or approached to play and represent Armenia's national ice hockey team. Now, funny enough, I thought it was a joke. I didn't even know it existed. But this is where some sort of transformation started to naturally happen in my life. Pulled me back into my Armenianism, let's just call it that. And then I began to kind of study a little bit more about Armenian culture, history. So I focused my historical research as much as I could, not to the levels of some scholars and whatnot, towards a lot more Armenian centric. However, as my life progressed and all this stuff that happened in my life with art, culture, and sports started pulling me back during the 2020 war, which obviously impacted everybody. Everybody was impacted in some way, shape, or form. I was trying to do my best to somehow contribute financially. And it was hard because we didn't have, we all got cut off. And I worked with the 3D work that I do. I was doing a lot of movie work and the movie world stopped. Everybody knows that what happened with Hollywood was completely shut down. There was no work coming in. I was like, okay, I've got to do something. So I ended up making a couple sculptures in 3D, and I decided I want to raffle these things off. One thing led to the next. It gained a little bit of traction, got some attention, and before you know it, and I think he's in here somewhere in the attendees tab, Vic Aslanyan, who's been a longtime childhood friend of mine, approached me about, and we started talking about a somewhat ambitious project, but we didn't think it would take on the life that it did. And so we decided to make statues in a really modern way using 3D technology, 3D scanning, 3D modeling, 3D printing specifically. And it was kind of a fresh idea. And there was a lot of people that embraced it. But then that led to us having a lot of historical conversations, specifically about Armenian history. And all of this was in discussion in English. So Vic had a very bright idea and asked me if I wanted to do a podcast. And so at first I was really hesitant because I got a little camera shy back then, but I guess I've kind of gotten over it after almost 100 episodes. And we decided to jump in and try it. And we called it Medherosnej, and our heroes for any of our non-English speaking audience. And it started to take a lot of, it got a lot of traction. I mean, not crazy numbers, but our whole idea was, the whole premise was to discuss Armenian history in English, because the way I was taught Armenian history in Armenian private schools felt very linear and always talked about just certain victories. And then you get the big doom and gloom, excuse me for saying, the genocide, right? And that, to Lena's point earlier, it's always been the big dark cloud in our history, but I feel like nobody kind of thinks past that about our rich history that goes back thousands of years. And I think people need to focus a lot more on that, because that's what got us here today, right? We haven't disappeared. Yes, we've gotten bigger, we've gotten smaller, things have happened, unfortunately, throughout our history, but I think me and Vic started to focus on what really happened. And we had the fortunate pleasure of meeting some unbelievable scholars, some unbelievable historians, archaeologists along the way that then wanted us to speak to other people and so on and so forth. And we grew this community of people from all over the world. Interestingly enough, we were getting viewers and listeners from Africa.
Of course.
And not from necessarily Ethiopia, different, Sierra Leone, I forget what other countries, but it was like 3 or 4 nations out of Africa were listening to us, and we're like, wow, this is pretty crazy. Like, we must be doing something right. And so anyway, our whole focal point about the podcast became really trying to talk about what really happened instead of just your typical Armenian history books that at least I got to experience when I was growing up. Not just talking about those victories, because that's not what history is all about. And that's going to lead me to my next point, is the erasure of our history. And so Vic and I, once this started to gain traction, we started to understand that, like, we're actually digitizing our history. We're talking to people, we're literally putting this out into the ether, if you will. And people began to, we started to realize that there's a lot of people listening to this, not just Armenians, but a lot of non-Armenians, a lot. We were getting emails, we were getting people writing to us, commending us on what we were doing, because there's a lot of history fans in the world, not just wherever they're from. You know, if somebody's from Australia, yeah, sure, you get Australian history, but people wanted to learn more about specific parts of the world. And it was interesting to them because we were discussing Armenian history in English, but we were also tying world history events around Europe, around Russia, around the eastern part of the world, and even some parts of Africa and the Middle East that tied into what was really happening. And we gave context to our Armenian history with so much information. So it was really interesting. And it was really interesting for us to even talk about it. So, you know, it turned into this adventure of not only Vic and I learning, but everyone else learning with us. Because we were not scholars, we're not historians, but let's just call it, we're fans. And we wanted everybody to embrace that with us as well. But then during this time, we started to find out that Azerbaijan was basically talking about how we're trying to somehow connect, and I'm sorry, I have to laugh, connect the ancient Albanian people to their current lineage, which we all know has absolutely zero to do with. And so Vic and I, funny enough, had discussed the Albanians numerous episodes with a lot of information. And so when we found out about it, we're like, oh my God, they're literally step by step trying to maybe propagandize and erase certain portions of history or twist certain portions of history. And as a history fan, not just of Armenia, of other types of history, when you really study history in specific regions, you begin to understand that a lot of the history books omit or leave out a lot of important and pertinent information. I'm sure you, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, would probably attest to this as well. There's a lot of interesting Easter eggs you'll find as you study deeper and deeper in particular portions of the world. So we found that we're becoming like, okay, we're actually doing something really important here. And so this wasn't our initial aim, but then it became our aim over time. And we started to understand that there's so many people across the diaspora outside of Armenia that are doing their part. And I guess we were a little microcosm of it. But at least we have left, and we're still leaving a digital footprint of it, which I think is really important because you can't erase that. At least I would hope not. So I'd like to conclude with that. And I'm sure we'll probably discuss a lot more as we move forward.
Absolutely. And we, I feel deprived that you didn't share some of the films with us. So we might need to have a special webinar on the usage of films to educate and influence accountability
Yes. Yeah, I can, if we do this again, if and when we do this again, I can
We
can
do that
definitely
again.
we can put some
Exactly.
things together for that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And on actually May 5th, we are going to have a webinar also for the United Nations using a film on how easy it is for just any private individual to purchase uranium in this world.
Wow.
And actually, I'm very happy to say that one of the audience surprises today is Shani Hadiza, who made that documentary. So we have plenty to do, so much to do.
We do. We all do.
And today and now we are giving the floor or the screen to the Honorable Gassia Abkarian.
Thanks.
Please, Gassia.
Thanks so much for having me. This is a pleasure. It's wonderful hearing. Michelle, your story is great because didn't Armenia just last weekend play Indonesia ice hockey in Yerevan? They did.
Oh, yes. Oh, and I completely forgot. I got caught up with what I was saying. I'm so sorry. And yes, and eventually it led me to moving to Yerevan literally last week. Sorry to say that.
No, the ice. Thank you for having me. So my story is kind of a combination of everything I heard. So I grew up until 8th grade, going to Armenian school and studying history. And I have to tell you, I don't remember ever studying any victories. It was from, one disastrous war to the next, starting with Vartanants, those of you who know, that's from the olden days. And so, I grew up in Lebanon, and Armenia was this faraway land that you couldn't reach. It was in the Soviet Union, and to a kid that meant very little. The genocide was something that, my grandmother was born in 1900 and she died in 1993. And I lived with her extensively. And it was sort of some story that, is in the past, and, it had very little to do with me. And so when Armenia became independent, I had just finished law school, and the only thing I wanted to do was move to the Independent Republic of Armenia because this was a dream come true. My grandmother was still alive, and I told her, Med's mama, I'm moving to Armenia. And she said, are you crazy? The Turks will kill you, right? And I said, no, it's a new era. It's independent, there no problems whatsoever. I moved to Armenia, and subsequently my grandmother died, and that had a lot of meaning for me. But I moved to Armenia with an organization called the Armenian Assembly of America to work. And I remember, Lena, just for you to know this, when I was doing my interview with them to try and get this job, because all I wanted to do was move to Armenia, I said to them, I'll work on any issues except the genocide. I'm just not in, whatever, right? That's the path. I'm looking at an independent republic, and where do we take this nation? This is the future. We have been liberated, right? And I sort of stuck to that over the years. I never did anything about the genocide. Oddly enough, what happened was, so, I'm a lawyer, and then I became a judge. And then unfortunately, 2020, I was watching, just like you said, live stream of horrendous war crimes taking place. And at the same time this started, I was actually trying to write my grandmother's story. And I had written about 150 pages, and I put the book aside, and I thought, why am I writing this story? It's happening live in front of me. So what I was avoiding for years followed me, and it follows our people. But I'm a litigator by nature. I used to be a trial attorney. I did trials day in and day out. I'm a trial judge. To me, You know, justice, people think justice is this like this word out there. It's a very simple thing. If it feels wrong, then there's no justice. I mean, it's just that's as simple as that. And the problem comes in to how do you qualify? How do you change that? What does justice look like to you? And it looks like a lot of things to a lot of people. To me, justice has really one definition, okay? You have to go to court and you have to have victims who are suffering the plight of these atrocities to be heard. It's not about a judgment. It's not about a verdict, but it's about giving victims of crimes, and I don't care where they are and what the crime is, there is no difference. You know, whether you're killing millions of people or you're killing 10 people, the victims are suffering exactly just as much. So it's not about, oh, that crime was worse because, 100,000 people died. This crime is not so bad because only 10 people died. Those victims suffered the same agony and they have to be heard. They have to have an opportunity to be heard. And what does being heard mean? It's what Michelle's doing. It's what Lena's doing. But ultimately, a victim will not feel heard unless they can tell their story. And when I say they can tell their story, they have to have an audience who's going to listen. And that audience for me is court. It's the opportunity to be heard. So that's what I call access to justice, okay? Because every day I'm in court and people have access to justice. They have a problem, they go to court. Someone's been, killed, maimed, hurt, lost their house, lost their home, lost their livelihood. They get to go to court. They have access to justice in the West. And I will say that access to justice in the West still exists. It is these other countries where are these victims supposed to go? Where does access start? And that is why I became subsequently what got to be known as the Center for Truth and Justice. At the time, a bunch of lawyers and I literally during the war got together and said, well, someone's got to document this. And my attitude was, it's got to be documented so that it becomes evidence in court, right? And that's a whole different trick. It's a whole, not a trick, but it's a very specific way of doing admissible evidence is different than just, telling your story. And we knew this was COVID and the war was going on. And we knew, we cannot go to Armenia and do this. So we started this other part, which is the educational part. We trained over 100 law students in Armenia and in Artsakh because in order for a victim to tell their story and their deepest, darkest story, and I'll get to why it gets very dark, is they have to trust the person. So an American Armenian or a German Armenian or it doesn't matter, a Portuguese Armenian flying to Armenia and saying, I feel your pain, I want to record your testimony, it doesn't work. It has to be someone that can relate to them, speaks their language, understands the truth that is in their reality. So that's that. A lot of the things that you are an expert in is what we had to teach. And it took about 9 months intensive day and night Zoom training as they were recording these testimonies. And the reason it became so much more complicated is because, especially in Artsakh, but in Armenia as well, but specifically in Artsakh, the young students who are now full-fledged lawyers were also victims themselves. I remember one day, one of the volunteers, a young student that we had trained, and she was in a room, with a video camera with, because we always said 2 of you have to be at the same time. There's a whole protocol to do this. And as she starts recording, she gets a phone call from her family in Artsakh that her uncle had been maimed and killed by Azeris. So the person taking the testimony is simultaneously not just the victim of the environment, but the victim where she lost her uncle. So, and I get a phone call saying, what should we do? And I said, drop everything and go to your family. It's okay. But because that's how committed they were and they are to this work. And words that came out of my mouth when I was teaching to do this to the Artsakh students, I would say to them, think about it this way. For example, I don't have videos of my grandmother from, 80, 90 years ago, okay? So I have to patch pieces together from people who know her and her letters. And I said, think about it, let's like 50, 60 years from now, theoretically, if Artsakh is not around, what you record is what will survive. And that's how people will know what Artsakh is. I wish I had never said those words, because within 2.5 years of me saying those words, Artsakh did disappear. And what we do have is this rich archive of testimonial evidence that was done in their dialect, because that's one of the other things that we insist is that don't speak proper Armenian or don't speak Russian, because it's, speak your dialect. So we recorded their truth in their home, in their environment, in their dialect. But ultimately, so we did a bunch of things, right? So we educated a lot of people. We established a center. We have over 600 testimonies. And this morning I got a phone call from staff in Yerevan that said, the shooting is continuing in the southern region of Armenia. Should we go down and take testimony? And every time I get one of these phone calls, I'm torn between, number one, safety, but number two, who else is going to do it? Yes, we need this. So what did we do with all of this? Just really briefly, we put it all together last April. It's been exactly a year, and we delivered the first communication to the ICC. And I just want to tell you, when we first started doing this work, Armenia was not a member of the ICC. So because of the work we did, we became a part of coalitions like with Gurgen and others in Armenia, where we also supported Armenia to take these steps forward to become a part of the international community. Because ultimately, Armenians are not going to save each other, okay? We have to be a part of the larger community. And when we say no one hears our story, well, no one's ever going to hear our story unless we get it to the right place, in the right format. And so my cause d'etre, if you will, is to secure jurisdiction for these victims. And the one thing I have to say for those who are listening, especially the Armenians, the one thing I hear from all Armenians is, oh, when's that going to happen? And I go, it takes a long time, but I'm here and the documentation is here, and that's going to continue. And you have to pursue it. So justice, even I just want to tell one really short story, just the pursuit of justice and how it empowers people. Many Armenians will know who I'm talking about. There was an Armenian woman in 2022 who was mutilated in Armenia by Azerbaijanis. I mean, in the worst way. She was one of 4 or 5 women where her eyes were gouged out, her ears were cut off, her fingers were cut off. It was a very, very horrendous, horrible scene. And her sister is the one who took her children in, and I took her testimony. And that person, was a school teacher and had a night job so that she could take care of her sister's kids as well. All of them traumatized to levels unimaginable, because Azerbaijan played that video over and over and over again for weeks on end. It was almost like an Azerbaijani party, okay? So we took this woman's testimony, we created reports, we filed them with here and there under, UN, Geneva, this and the other. We put it in the ICC report. We took her to The Hague, okay? Subsequently, we were able to send her to Washington, D.C. to testify in front of the Human Rights Commission. This woman today has decided to go to law school in order to pursue her sister's justice, okay? And she has become a hero to her nephews, because they look at her as not someone who was crushed but by what Azerbaijan did, but by someone who stood up and is going to go forward with this. So through the work we do, we actually are able to empower these victims to know that their day is coming, but they have to work hard just like we do. So that's what the Center for Truth and Justice does, and that's what I do. Part-time, after hours, as an advisor.
Amazing. Each one here is a hero. So I'm so humbled. Just to kick off our, you can unmute now, please, because this is a time for dialogue among you. Instead of me talking, I'm sure each one of you has something to say to the other or to ask of the other. So please feel free.
I have a question for Michelle.
Sure.
So this issue of you putting on discussions about ancient Armenia, old Armenia. So this idea that Azerbaijan is pursuing the takeover of the Republic of Armenia and what they call Western Azerbaijan is not just a concept. They actually have a 20-year plan they actually have a website called Western Azerbaijan, and they are now opening offices and pseudo consulates throughout the world in order to establish Western Azerbaijan. And yeah, Yael, just to let you know, when they say Western Azerbaijan, they mean Armenia. That's their way of justifying the aggressive war and takeover of Armenia. So I'm just curious, I mean, because what you're doing is amazing. We need this out there so that the world doesn't think there's such a thing as Western Azerbaijan. Have you experienced that?
Well, I can add a little something else to that, and I'm sure I'm not teaching any of you, ladies and gentlemen, about this. Is we all know that there is a province in the northern part of Iran called Azerbaijan, and they're pretty much trying to stake claim to this as well. So it goes beyond just what we know as Armenia proper now, but you're also talking about they're looking to somehow, through, of course, the might of money and propaganda and buying off, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, buying off a lot of, like you said, text and rewriting history in a way, is the constant output of the nonsense in terms of what they think is rightfully theirs when it's not. I mean, history speaks for itself. There isn't anything that, let's say, for instance, me and Vic have ever found or talked to anybody that could even possibly give them any credit to making these claims, like zero. We haven't come across anything personally, to be honest. Thankfully, we might have had some trolls online, maybe jump into the stream and make a stupid comment, but nothing like that. You know, you block them right away. Kind of have that privilege with YouTube, but you hear a lot of the type, and I guess I might be kind of crossing into some geopolitics, is, you know, they're buying off a lot of politicians in Europe and wherever else through their natural gas and oil money. And so I think personally, I mean, I'm a really ambitious and optimistic person. I might maybe sound a little naive, but I don't think that's going to go anywhere, because there's too much evidence and too much information for too long for somebody to come in and, let's say, within a 20-year span, try and erase something or try and kind of change something or encompass something. I think
Gorgon, you can interrupt. It's okay. It is we are now talking with each other, so you can interrupt, Mike. Go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt, but I think.
Oh no, go ahead.
I don't think that we don't need to take that seriously. I think this Western Azerbaijan ideology that has been developed is not just for no reason. They are pushing for that. We have ignored for a very long time all these attempts from Azerbaijan to destroy the Armenian culture in Nagorno-Karabakh, in Artsakh. They tried for several years to call Dadivank as an Albanian church, and if we don't preserve this church, after 10 years, this will be known as an Albanian church. I think we need to take that very, very seriously, and we don't need to ignore that.
No, not at all. I mean, I don't think anybody should ignore it. Any attempt made at changing history should be taken seriously. It doesn't matter who it is or where it is. And I think that's something we began to realize, as I was mentioning during my introduction, was I don't think Vic and none of the we found out a lot of this stuff in depth as we were moving forward with the information. And when we did, that's when we began to realize that what we're doing is way more important than what we thought what we were doing. And it's, you know, now it plays a pivotal role. I know they can buy off a lot of might with their finances and whatnot, but again, there's still a lot of information out there that needs to get passed on, that needs to get passed around by people who do research, even on their own, because the historians can only do so much.
Michael, I agree with you, and also with Gürgen. I mean, it's like, you know, there was just a conference, an Albanian church Christian conference at the Vatican. And the Pope has been supremely supportive of Armenia, went to Armenia in 2016, met with our Catholicos. But yet, by the same token, the Pontifical Gregorian University hosted a Christian Albanian conference, which was Armenian Artsakh, Dadivang, Aramas Monastery, which are now being touted, you know, they're being erased and rebranded. This is pure revisionism of our history. And it's, you know, there are stages to genocide, which I know, Yael, I'm sure we've, you know, you've studied, and so many scholars, is that the last stage, they say, is denialism, revisionism. For us, it's like revisionism plus let's do another one by starting with Western Azerbaijan, as you're all saying, and then use it as a basis to legitimize military attacks and ongoing occupation and incursions into Sunni and Armenian sovereign territory. It is like a slippery slope, and we have to combat it vehemently through media campaigns and by being as aggressive back, because if we don't, they're going to rewrite it. That's what I believe, unfortunately.
Yes, and let's just remember Pope Francis, who we lost today, actually.
Yeah.
He's been a good friend of so many. I hope his mission remains.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Gürgen.
Yeah, I want just to add what Lena said about the justification of this Western Azerbaijan, and I see there is a question also from the public asking about the crime of aggression. Judge has already mentioned that we became the member to International Criminal Court. However, even Armenia joined the International Criminal Court. It didn't join the Kampala Amendment, which recognizes the crime of aggression. And I think this is the clear momentum for Armenia also to join the Kampala Amendment, because Armenia does not have any intention of attacking any one of the neighbors, but it's still a legal gap that Armenia needs to solve, recognizing the crime of aggression is happening against Armenia at this moment. And secondly, an important point is what Lena mentioned with the justification, this ideology around the Western Azerbaijan, and also from the rhetoric that the President Aliyev is always mentioning, that they are going to eradicate the fascism in Republic of Armenia if, I don't know, the government will not take any steps of doing that. It creates the justification for attacking and advancing into the Armenian territory. And I think from the legal perspective, the Armenian this is the obligation of Armenia at this moment to join the Kampala Amendment, and also join all these discussions around reforming the crime of aggression, because from the legally speaking, the crime of aggression does not really give a protection to the victim state at this moment. It gives actually some kind of limitations to the aggressive state if it's ratifies the Kampala Amendment. But all these reforms and all this tragedy that we're experiencing since 2022 with the aggression of our northern neighbors has created this momentum of reforming. And for Armenia, it's also important to join all this discussion and push for reforming the crime of aggression, giving the victim states the possibility for better protection.
And maybe you will join us in New York in July at the meeting on the crime of aggression, so we can meet in person again, Gurgen, and
Yes.
we can meet in person first time, Lena and Garcia and Michelle. But Michelle, I'll meet you in Armenia.
Just a second, because there is also another, before the New York, there is also another big event happening in Armenia, because Judge Apkaryan and the Center for Truth and Justice organizes another conference in Armenia happening on that, so we can push all together for Armenian government to join the Kampala Amendment and join all this, join the efforts around the Kampala.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Rebecca, for asking the question. Rebecca is a good old friend and an amazing advocate for the ICC.
Could I, there's a question that I kind of want to address. It says,
yeah, there are two questions. Since you already ran over and went to the questions and to the comments, we might as well follow you. So
well,
there are two questions about, there are two questions precisely about what about the churches in Turkey that were, Nidal, I don't know what you were planning to finish your question with. And there's a question, without politics involving into this, I don't think we can do without politics, but just the same, what is your response on Pashinyan agreeing to withdraw all cases against Azerbaijan from the courts?
So that's the one that I
actually
actually
have a whole lot of very specific, important questions. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the first thing I always say to people is, I mean, because Aliyev and Azerbaijan are constantly talking about demanding that Armenia withdraw from all international courts. And the first thing I say to them is, why do you think they say this? Why do you think Aliyev says this? And that's because that's my whole point is we have to be a part of the international legal community. We have to be in the international courts because that is such a weak link, a weak spot for Azerbaijan. Because I've always said, politically, we might lose. Militarily, we might lose. But when it comes to courts, we win because the facts are on our side. And this is, and it will create such a problem for Azerbaijan and Aliyev. And that's why they constantly demanding it. So the good news is, Pashinyan has talked about withdrawing from the courts, but it's really not on the table. It's really not something that has been agreed to. And it's a lot. Here's my answer to that. I hope both sides will talk about this forever. Let them constantly say you need to withdraw, and they'll say, sure, we'll withdraw if you do this, but we would, and the other says, but conditionally, if you withdraw, then I won't. Let them keep doing this, and the Armenian people should not get caught up, because that, if they're going to keep arguing about the ifs and whens and the conditions, great, because it gives us time and space without bombs falling on the heads of Armenians, because it gives us time for peace. And they can discuss this as long as they want. So my answer is, of course, we shouldn't withdraw. Are we going to withdraw? I don't see it. No one is saying we're going to. This is just political back and forth, which is great. Let them keep at it. Let them put more conditions. That's fine. So I just wanted to put that out there, how important being a part of the international legal system is for Armenia, and Kampala and the crime of aggression. That's why we have an entire conference in Yerevan for 3 days focused only on this, because just like Gurgen and I were a part of getting Armenia to become a member of the ICC, we're now trying to get them to agree to this, because this is all about agency. I mean, we all suffer from pain of being victims, descendants of survivors of genocide, but ultimately the pain comes from lack of agency, lack of ability to be heard and to make a difference, right? So Kampala gives Armenia yet one more route to have agency. Anyway.
Very well said.
And actually, our center exists exactly for that, just to bring the victims groups together, to learn from each other, to help each other, to handle the world together. It's because each one is sometimes too much by themselves.
Well, yeah, that's such a worldly view. I just wanted to add, there was a question about the precedent for cultural erasure. I want to say that there is a long standing precedent that goes back over a century. If you go back to the city of Ani and you see the ruins of 1,001 churches that have been destroyed or turned into barns or just leveled, it starts there, maybe even before then. And then you look at the 10,000 crossstones of Nakhichevan, which is the enclave that used to be majority Armenian, which now has been emptied of Armenians, and all the churches and the crossstones that were destroyed there. So there is a history of that kind of cultural erasure and destruction, which has gone on, again, without accountability. And so I would agree with everyone's point, and especially also with Gassia, that, you know, having legal precedents, and I will go back and say that those ICJ opinions that were based on the racial hate and discrimination, I really stood strong on those when I was advocating for legislation. I said, there is a policy here that's being pushed, and it's now been verified in the international courts. And so it really firms up the political angle as well.
I hate to say this, but I saw a post today, and that I just want to that Azerbaijan has now surpassed ISIS in its destruction of monuments. So that the level of destruction by day that's going on of Armenian monuments and has now surpassed what ISIS did. So just putting it out there.
I remember when I was working in Bosnia, is one of the places, and I went from Tuzla to Banja Luka, and the first thing my hosts did was take me on top of the hill overlooking Banja Luka and showing me how 5 minutes into the war, 11 mosques were blown, and all together at the same time. And so, Nidal, your question broke my heart, actually. I remember very similarly. Yeah, it seems, and you remember the old temple was destroyed in Jerusalem too. Destroying culture is seems to be a deeply psychological, an evidence of deep psychological understanding of the importance of culture and the continuity of culture and the threat of culture in protecting and defending its people, right? Yeah, here you go. I think examples, I promised you a very active audience. You have it all here. So Aris is saying, I think as examples, Serbia, Syria, Ukraine. We can go all over the world, literally.
Yeah.
Afghanistan, you remember that is a tactic that profoundly understands people's togetherness, people's commitment in the psychosocial, religious way. They feel embraced and define themselves as communities.
Yeah, if I may just
Please.
when we did, I think it was 22 or 23 when we did our second conference. I don't remember. This is our fourth conference. We had a special committee that was very active about saving or legal avenues to do something about the cultural heritage. But specifically in 2020, what happened was because Azerbaijan was able to take over 75% of the land, simultaneously they took over museums, schools, libraries, and overnight, Armenians lost this tremendous amount of art and artifacts. That is documented. So in Armenia, there was someone who overnight was able to empty like half of a museum and get it to Armenia. So we sat down with him, we documented the whole thing, but then we started doing this legal work of, can you trace the stuff? And if you can, what legal avenues are there? So we invited the big names in this world from all over the world to come to the conference. And I'll tell you, after 30 people at the conference, and the result was, it's next to impossible to take any legal steps, even to track or find art, carpets, rugs, artifacts. And even if you find it, the legal avenues of doing anything is almost impossible. So, so the erasure takes place starting from people's personal albums, family photos that they left behind because they had to leave in the middle of the night with their shirts on their backs, to entire museums that disappeared with so much art and artifacts, because Armenians and Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh in Artsakh are like indigenous for 6,000 years. It's old, they're old. And so the loss is even more than just did they build, did they take over a church or a monument? It's art and books, and it's so anyway, it's the erasure is the second level of genocide.
Yeah, it actually is called named genocide by some people. And it's certainly a tactic of genocide, and the ICC recognizes the attempted destruction of new culture and art as a crime. It's an international crime. That is, yeah, don't make a face, Gordon. It's true. Actually, it's one of the successful cases. It's one of the successful cases. The destruction of culture, absolutely. So,
no, I totally agree with you, but under the genocide is difficult because to put it under genocide.
and Rebecca is helping me that this was the Mali case against Almaty. Thank you, Rebecca, for being so. Yeah, so
we have indeed a very successful case with Almaty, but
yeah, well, that's an important case, to think of when we for this discussion. Go ahead, sorry.
Gurgen,
Yeah,
I'm
but,
going to hold you to this, Gurgen, because Yael said this is the one of the most successful. So we got to talk about this, Gurgen.
Indeed, we need. But coming back to the factual grounds, looking at what the Turkey, because Lena, you have mentioned very correctly about the churches in Turkey and the crossstones in Nakhichevan. But I want to mention something maybe that is not covered too much, or even not covered by media. Yeah, the city of Ani is the UNESCO protected, is a UNESCO cultural heritage. So Turkey will think twice in order to touch something in Ani, in the city Ani. But there were thousands and hundreds and thousands of churches in the Ottoman Empire, in Turkey, that left after the Armenian genocide. Similarly, in Azerbaijan, this is the clear example how the Azerbaijani policies are designed in order to erase the Armenian culture from the territories where Armenians used to live. Nobody speaks now that in the northern part of Nagorno-Karabakh, very close to Ganzak, there were many Armenian churches. Just open the Google map and look at that ruins. What exactly happened to those churches, which were northern part, very northeastern part of the Shaumian region? Nothing is left. No sign of those churches. Similarly, of course, with the Ghazan Shelsots and Dadivang and Amaras, these are under the attention of international community a little bit. But there are other churches that actually no one cares, and no one even has seen that. And these churches are being erased totally. Just look at the church that has been destroyed in Jabrail after the takeover. Look at the church in the Shushi Kanarjam. So all these churches are being erased, and nobody actually takes that under the consideration, that this is the policy, this is the ongoing policy to erase at least those that are not under the attention of the international community.
So
And
Gassia,
to show that we preserve actually the Armenian church. Look at the, I don't know, the Amaras is still kept, so nothing is happening.
Gassia, I would think that this should be also taken up by your center. Very
Absolutely. Here's the sad
sorry,
part.
I'm just
The sad part for our center is it is overwhelming how much there is to be done. And
exactly.
the great part about our center is we are super busy. But the reason I say sad is because if we're busy, it means bad things are happening. Okay.
Yes,
Because
also, you know, that's where the center can really be of help. I'm very reminded, I'm a little disappointed, but we are the day after Easter and some people are still enjoying holidays. So we don't have some of the people who were going to join us. For example, Eva Hofmanska, who built Yellow Flowers, which is an organization that helped Ukrainians to collect witness testimonies. And they've been working with us very closely in training those people how to protect themselves and to protect the victims from being re-traumatized. So there's a lot of wisdom our different activities can really contribute. That would be great. But Michelle, part of what I'm hearing is that people are saying, please do that too, include that. This is a very important center of what's going on to include in your very unique way of teaching the world and teaching the youth of the world, really. To remember and to take advice and to remember what can really change things, because you really appeal to the youth.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something that one of the first things Vic and I noticed was, you know, a lot of the Armenian youth, possibly in the diaspora, unless they're going to a specific school that focuses on these types of things, they don't know much about our history. They're Armenian, they love the culture, they love the heritage, but just talking to them, I'm embarrassed to bring up certain examples, and this is not to knock our youth, but when you start noticing these things, I mean, it makes you sad, but at the same time, it was interesting to see that they're embracing what we were talking about and they wanted to learn more. And we had a lot of young people write to us. So this was really important to us. Obviously, it wasn't just, let's say, somebody's family who was simulated somewhere, I don't know, maybe in Argentina or Australia or wherever, and then they kind of wanted to get back in touch with their Armenian side. We had a lot of young people really enjoy listening to, because me and Vic are very loose about things, and we try to make it fun and digestible. Furthest thing from, you know, the hard jargon of academia. And so it was fun, and we appealed to a lot of young people, and I think it's important because I mean, we're not on the legal side. You wonderful ladies and gentlemen are dealing with all the important legal stuff, and so I can't even begin to imagine how this would be able to be countered to, let's say, what Azerbaijan has planned or did have planned for 20 years or whatever the case is. But I mean, we're trying to fire back from a different angle, maybe from a different flank. You know, you keep this alive and keep it going. And just like Kasia said, let them keep bickering, and we're just going to keep firing arrows as long as we can, you know, with all sorts of information.
Absolutely. That's why Lena made it into law. So to make
Yeah.
sure that people are exposed to this knowledge, even though it's a difficult knowledge, and we always have to be careful how we teach it with, right? So go ahead, Guggen, please.
I want to make some personal experience, because I've studied in Armenia. I went to school in Armenia. So all the history around Armenian genocide and Armenian genocide, I have been taught in Armenian school. And being in the school, I couldn't even imagine that there are so many Armenians living outside of Armenia. They do not have this direct connection to this all roots. And this is the moment when I want to give you, Michelle, an appreciation for the work that you are doing, because I can imagine how many Armenians that feel themselves as Armenians, but they don't have any access or the possibility of learning Armenian history. And now I want to make another connection, because we all hear about Armenian genocide. Something bad had happened to us, but we don't know what exactly had happened and how exactly this had been committed. And I think this could be also a suggestion for you to take to cover maybe one of your podcasts, also going into the very details of the Armenian genocide, because I wanted also to mention one particular thing, making this historical connection between the Nuremberg, between the Germany, Nazi Germany, and also the Armenian genocide. You know, I live in Nuremberg. This is the place where the Nazi regime and Nazi government has been sued for the atrocities that have been committed. But not only for the Nuremberg trials is the Nuremberg known, but also for the racial laws that has been established here.
Yes.
And not only the racial laws, but also the hate speech that has been developed so far. There was a newspaper in Germany, in the Nazi Germany, known as Der Stürmer. And Der Stürmer has always portrayed and has shown the Jewish community with big noses, that as a traitor, that they are actually the main problem of all problems of Germany, losing the wars, etc., etc. So building all these conspiracies. And if we look back to the Ottoman Empire, there was another newspaper similarly known in Ottoman Empire that portrayed Armenians again with big noses as a traitors that have fought against the Turkish with the Russians during the Ottoman Empire. And this paper was known as Eskihar. My Turkish is not good. Tesfiri Efkihar. That paper name was not known as Tesfiri Efkihar. I think this is something very interesting to make this comparison, how these papers use these wordings against the Armenians. Because imagine a person living in Ottoman Empire without having the social media connections, internet. You read the paper and you accept that as something very true. So you believe in this and you continue believing and spreading this ideology around the Turkish community, around the Turkish population, that they are the traitors. And interestingly, the tribunal here in Nuremberg, it made a statement, and in judgment, it's very interesting. Very interestingly, the judges at the Nuremberg tribunal found that the words that were used in the Stürmer, in the newspaper, were the poison in the German minds. And I think this is exactly what we are witnessing in Azerbaijan, because every word that the Aliyev is spreading, these are the receivers of these words. They take that as a tabula rasa, and then they bring these all efforts in order to fulfill the expectations of their president. So I think this these methodologies are very important to show that there are a lot of similarities that happened in Rwanda, in Nazi Germany, and in Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, to add a little snippet to what you were saying, there was a few episodes we did.
This is Peter. Wait, Peter, let me introduce you.
Oh,
This is Peter Valawan.
oh, he decided to jump in.
Yes, thank you. Let me just apologize first, Peter, because what I didn't say before, that actually we began our friendship and the Armenian community involvement with the center because of your film, because of the documentary. So
Yeah.
maybe you can just mention that. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
I didn't think I was going to be talking with everybody. I was just sending my messages, so I'm kind of caught off guard. But yeah, we met because of the desire to live, and it was basically recording the stories of, you know, right after the war had stopped, and Mariam Avedisian was a Stepan Agetsi that basically had recorded some footage for their TV station, and I connected to her immediately, and I wanted to continue her to record the stories, and that's what we did. And the desire to live was basically 40 episodes of, you know, testimonial of people living in their homes, which now don't exist anymore as Armenian homes. And those footages, I realized afterwards, were also just recordings maybe at the time, but I knew there was an urgency for me to do something, because I felt that just because the war had ended doesn't mean the problem was going to change. And this is the thing with Armenia, and I love the fact that you guys are discussing it on a much higher range when it comes down to just when it's related to how the genocide has affected us, you know, or traumatized those generations. Which trauma continues is because it continues. The genocide has never ended. The erasure of Armenians has never ended. It's not going to end until our enemies decide to change their road or path, or decide, or they go away, which I have no idea of. But I'm on the side of saving who we are, and I love the fact that all of our speakers today have been incredibly active their whole lives, whether they knew it or not. But parallel and together, we tell our stories and we fight for those stories. Everybody has a role, and Yal has her role, and that's amazing that she has always asked me to come back. And at first, I didn't know if this was something that I had time to spend on, but I realized how important it was as well. So Yal, thank you very much for always giving us a platform and giving people a platform, not just Armenians, just humans that need to tell their stories. I mean, justice is, for me, something when somebody that's got away with injustice doesn't get prosecuted for or paid its price for. Like, and people take their justice into hands, like the Talerian story, when the courts they found him guilty, okay, and we all know who it was. They found him guilty, and he basically decided to live in Germany free from persecution, and he had to be put to death because he orchestrated the Armenian genocide. He was one of them, the Pashas. So basically, when Talerian decided to take his decision to pull the trigger, it was one man's act, but in reality, it also was a whole population that was looking for justice. And this is what happens if it doesn't happen in the courts, or if the courts can't persecute the people that need to be persecuted. And we don't want to live in a world like that. So, and Yal, and you know, your organization is helping us not to deal with it that way, and tell our stories in ways that we can hopefully make a difference.
Thanks, Peter. And please, for the audience, all of the webinars are recorded, and that film is also recorded and is available on our website. So you can literally learn from year to year more and more. And Gorgen, you got yourself a job. We will together plan the next webinar doing exactly what you recommended. and Lena, you will do the same. We already decided that because education is so centrally important on all levels, right? It's sort of for all people, actually. We'd already decided, so I'm formally inviting you. January 24 is International Day of Education. And Michelle, you'll be there too. And we will have a webinar about education about genocide.
Thank you. I'd be honored. Thank you. That's very
so it will be
wise and
different
awesome.
groups that time because, right, we have some of our webinars in group, just like this one, which is so important, and some are intergroup, right? So we will have a Holocaust education, Armenian education, Rwanda education, Yazidi education. We will do it across groups and learn from each other. So, and Gasia, you will we will plan one, of course, and Gorgen, you're stuck with that too. Of course, the importance of justice, and what do we mean by reparative justice? So let me just add one little word about that. That reparative justice is not only about the outcome, it's about the process. Now, Rebecca, you're in, don't worry about it. Thank you, Rebecca. You're in. So it considers the process equally important or more important than the outcome from the victim's standpoint. And it considers the victim in relationship with the justice system. So, for example, what we do in relationship, like call each other, how are you, and keep catching news of each other. But the court should keep the victims appraised of what's going on with their trial. The court staff should ask how they are, should want to heal them during the process, right? Because from the reparative justice point of view, every moment, even before the trial, and suddenly follow up after the trial, is a moment of opportunity to either heal the victim or traumatize or just use the victim. And then the victim is all alone in the world again, and in fact with open wounds, right? Or reopen wounds. So that is our humble addition to that. I hate to stop this. This is just too wonderful. So I want, and we always ask for last words. Are you up for last words, or would you like to continue some? Is there anything before last words that you still want to say?
There's always a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I'll say this. I've never been a part of this group. Thank you so much for having me. And I actually didn't know Michelle or Lena, and it's a pleasure to meet you. And Yael, you are amazing and have so much energy to be doing this for as long as you've been doing, because I can vouch for the fact that I've been at this for 5 years, and there are days when even Gurgen knows I say, okay, this one last thing and I'm done. And he goes, you're never done. But it is exhausting doing this, because in some ways, Yael, you end up carrying the responsibility for all the people that you come in contact with. because they look to you, and as a result, they look to us for, okay, now what? You know, now what's happened? And that's the part that's the emotional exhaustion and wanting to shed that responsibility. But I guess once you touch this kind of work, you can't walk away from it. And it's also, I also feel very blessed to meet people like you, because it makes me realize we are not alone. Armenians need to know that we are not unique in our pain, and we are not alone in our pain. And that gives us, the rest of us, much more power to keep going. So you're an amazing model to look at. So thank you. Thank you for this.
You're most welcome. And I'm here to, as I always say, anytime you want to scream in the middle of the night or you want to weep, this is part of what we are here for too, because it is part of the work. And you know, there are some people are afraid that if they start expressing their anger, it will go on forever and destroy everything. So, and the same with crying. If they start crying, it will never stop. I have news for you as a psychologist. Every emotion has a beginning, a middle, and an end. We never stop cry forever. Unless we have weapons in our hands. Expression of anger is a normal human interaction. Weapons is something else. That's a whole other justice issue and legal issue. And we need so many bills about that, Lena. What are your last words? Oh, Jacqueline is here. She's the chair of our Rwanda working group. If you have Jacqueline, go ahead, sweetie. Robbie, put Jacqueline on, please. Jacqueline, come on, we need your voice, sweetheart. Are you here or you just... She works, so okay. Oh, she's not able to speak, right? She's trying to. So let me just read her chat. Survivors of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda stand with the Armenian community in your search for justice and accountability and fighting denialism. And actually, next Monday, we are having the webinar with Rwandan experts in Rwanda. So part of the idea is for this audience, for you Armenian people, to also be present in the Rwandan, right? So that we start actually being together and not just Armenians, Rwandans, Cambodians, each one lonely and alone. Thank you, darling. So Jacqueline wants the message of solidarity. We have it. Yes, Jill, go ahead, make a comment. Robbie, would you add Jill here? Go ahead.
I just wanted to share with you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, good. I just wanted to share with you. I worked in the Bosnian War. Then I worked responding to Rwanda. And then I was sent to Armenia, and I didn't even know, even though I was an international services graduate student or undergraduate student in international services, I didn't know where Armenia was. They just asked me if I was willing to go there 10 years after the earthquake to help. And I said yes, because there were still people living in railroad containers in Yerevan and Gyumri. I went there during April. And this wonderful Armenian artist took me up the mountain during the anniversary of the genocide, listening to the music of Lucien. And those of you from Armenia will understand about Lucien. And I remember just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing and promising myself that when I came back, I would let people know where Armenia was, and that it was the first time that the word genocide was ever practiced in the world, with the right around the First World War, when genocide happened in Armenia. People didn't know what was happening and how the genocide was done. And I remember I volunteer for Red Cross. I teach international humanitarian law. I remember trying to explain to people that were clueless about even where Armenia was, what it was as a country. And every year in April, I talked with my Armenian artist friend who took me up the mountain, and thank him so much for educating me so that I could educate others. And I think all of us need to do that, because without knowledge, we'll keep on repeating the strangest, craziest things every time, with obliterating a country, obliterating humans, and not realize we're all the fabric of humanity. I just had to share that with you. And thank you for bringing this up again in April. I appreciate you so much, Yael, and all of you on the panel. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I just wanted to share that with you.
Wonderful, Jill Hoffman. And she's speaking about Kevin Murad, who is also on our advisory council. and is a special, he was born in Aleppo, like you, Gassia, and he's an amazing artist. And actually, we have his work on a webinar that we have about Aleppo, March 14, right? That was Syria Day. So please watch that webinar too, because that was an extremely important webinar. It was the different phases of Aleppo. So we had Armenians, Muslims, Christians, speakers, and this was after the earthquake in Turkey. So to see how the help goes from country to country as well. Oh, wow. So, last words, anybody? I don't want to say goodbye, so it's up to you.
Sure, I'll say a few words. Oh, go ahead, Gürgen. Sorry, go ahead. You start. I'll go after. Go ahead.
The only thing that I can say, Yael, how much there is actually, it's very difficult to say after Judge how much I appreciate you and your energy. I saw your energy here in Nuremberg, and Judge, I wish you could also see that energy coming from Yael in person, because it's really very much, and I really love it. And really, the appreciation that I have, that all your fight that you have for the victims' rights coming from ATs, because of the persons like you, all your efforts you have done in ATs for the standing of the victims' rights, that we have actually, that has actually changed the whole world and whole paradigm about the victims being involved in the trials. I think this is a huge thing that you and your friends and your colleagues have done in 1980s. I researched on that, and I didn't think that once I will meet you and we will have this kind of good friendship together, speaking about the victims' rights in the webinar. So thank you for your all efforts, and again thank you for having such a good energy, such a positive energy, and such a wise energy, bringing the victims together. Thank you very much for having us and being such an energetic person.
Thank you. Now you're making me cry again. That's unfair. So I think there are two people who still want to speak, and I think we should let them, right? So, Rabbi, can you put Nidal on? And then there is one more person.
Hello,
Yes, go ahead,
can you
Nidal.
hear me? Yes,
Yes.
good evening. Thank you, Yael, and thank you for the
Thank
panelists.
you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, actually, you motivated me to just share you this experience, and this is very it's good to share you this because I have also the same suffer that Armenian people have had because my grandma is originally Armenian. She was from Bursa, but unfortunately she didn't remember her surname, so she stayed like she just remembered her name. But since she was very young, I mean, very young girl, so she lived in North Syria and forced to be Muslim because there were no Armenian in that area at that time. What I wanted to say that also about the Turkey and what it has done in Syria and especially for the Kurdish area because also I'm Kurdish background. My grandpa is a Kurdish. So we have this also the same systematic genocide which is acted by Turkish military and de factos, the radical de factos who are supported by them recently since 2018 and until 2024. And you know what's happened after the Assad regime fall in Syria. But during all this time, we, as Kurdish people in that area, suffered of this genocide and demographic changes, and many also were still deported from their village just because they are Kurds or they have some political issues. And also, what I want to add that it will be very nice if you, since you are Yael, are interested in the nations who suffered from genocide. I think it's good to highlight the Kurdish also. Kurdish people because we still, at least Armenia and other countries that you already mentioned, they now have their own country. They are now independence and they have their government and they are practicing their language and they have their schools. And I remember even in Yerevan there is a Kurdish radio since 88 or 85, 1985. Since that time, I remember there is they have this radio in Kurdish language. So it's good to highlight why it's good or important because we still don't do not allowed to practice our language. We still don't have schools in Kurdish language. We are still accused that we are all are AZD or we are following devils or those things. This stereotype about Kurdish people. And I want to say also something that now in Afrin, in my area, I'm so glad that the church started to activate it also since long time ago, since maybe 100 years ago, and now they now reactivated in this area, and people. Kurdish people go there and pray, and we have celebrated the Easter this year. Just want to mention this, and I'm really interested in this issue that you are discussing today. Thank you for the panelists, and I hope that I will be also in the speaker in the next webinar because I have many things to add to the genocide in Armenia, according to my grandma's tales and also the history that I read because I'm interested. I'm a political activist, and it's my pleasure to join you. Thank you so much for giving me this chance.
Thank you, Nidal. Please know that we have a Yazidi working group.
Yes.
very active. Please, we have many webinars and we meet regularly every second Tuesday. And I suggest the Armenians, we can do the same. And we study together, we plan things together. It's amazing. So
It's my
please,
pleasure today. Thank
please
you.
write to me directly. And this is again, that's what we're here for. Now, who is going to
if I
speak
can give
next?
if I can
Go
give a
ahead.
short feedback about, I have a huge sympathy for our very good brothers and sisters from Kurdistan, our Kurdish neighbors, because the Kurdish population is also a population that has suffered a lot from different atrocities. Starting from Dersim, going to Afrin, Syria, going to Anfals in Iraqi Kurdistan. So it's also a huge trauma that the Kurdish people has suffered. And I'm very happy that the Kurdish and Armenian friendship is continuing and developing. Me personally, I will be only in 2-3 weeks in Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan, teaching on genocide and on crimes against humanity and war crimes. So I'm always very well welcomed as an Armenian in Iraqi Kurdistan, and the same happens when the Kurdish people are coming to Armenia. Especially as you may know, the Armenian community, Armenia has a big Yazidi community in Armenia that are as brothers and sisters together. So in this difficult region, I think this connection with each other should be developed and continued.
So who is next? Michelle or Lena?
Michelle, go ahead. I'll go last.
I just want to say I'm still kind of in awe that I'm speaking to every single one of you. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like some of the getting to know each one of you individuals, at least just in this hour and a half, 2-hour time frame. And I know previous small little snippets that when we were introduced to each other a few days ago, I know, like, you guys are complete heavyweights, and it's an extreme honor to talk to you guys about all this stuff and hear what you guys are doing and how you guys are contributing. And I must say, it kind of takes my motivation level to like maybe heights that it hasn't been to. So it's kind of like, I don't know, you guys are sort of superheroes. I know I sound like a kid saying this, but I kind of come from that world, like the 3D world. You deal with all that kind of stuff, and yeah, I must say, you guys are like superheroes compared to some of the things that I've seen other people do. So,
you know, Michelle, I think you're the number one motivator. All I've ever wanted to be was a superhero. I only watch superhero shows, and I'm constantly asking, you know, because like during the day I wear a robe, and I'm always like, but it's not a cape, you know, I don't have a cape. So just to put it in context, I mean, I don't know about anybody else. We're not, the work you're doing is actually reaching people. What I do is like the narrowest of the narrow. So it takes all of us to move these issues even slightly forward. So, but thanks. I've always, somebody finally recognizes I'm a super.
I could, anytime you need a boost, I'm here for you.
But you see, I agree with you that everybody here is a hero, including you. For us, you're the voice that comes through to an age group that at our ages, we don't necessarily reach. And this is the age group that is the future. I mentioned before the right of future generations. You're the voice of current and future generations. So we need you. We absolutely need you, and we are here to help in any way you need.
And I just have to say one more thing. Obviously, I haven't done this myself whatsoever. I know he's still in here listening. Vic Aslanyan, he's back in LA. He was my partner in this from the beginning, and it was his fault we ended up doing this. So I wasn't alone in this. So the both of us have kind of done a lot with this, and people like you are now even more of a reason to keep this going as hard and as much as we can. So thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I mean, I think it's all been said so beautifully, and I do thank you so much, Yael, for giving us this beautiful platform. But I have to say, Mike, I mean, a lot of the things I had to do for myself, and having grown up in San Francisco, I went to Saturday Armenian school, but there were just not enough hours to get a historical education on Armenian history. And so I really had to go back and educate myself and go back and reread, well, what happened in 1921, you know, when Artsakh was, you know, declaring independence to begin with, and what happened at every stage, in order to have the background and even sort of like the legal arguments to say, you know, are we looking at Stalin as why Azerbaijan claims some type of territorial integrity, just like we would look at Hitler to say that Poland belonged to him? And so having historical accuracy as the standard to stand on and the basis really helps me and our youth and our ability to advocate. And even when I'm speaking to congressional offices or whoever, they listen to you much more when you understand the history, and it gives us the opportunity to educate, you know, let's say in the legal world or the political world. If you don't have that type of authority, then it's an opinion. And I think I really appreciate that. And thank you to all of the panelists. I'm inspired today. It is exhausting work. Sometimes you feel like it's an uphill battle. We feel like we are invisible in many ways. And so to have this type of empowerment and energy coming from you, Yael, doing this so many years, it's really wonderful. And thank you for giving us that type of positive energy. Thank you.
And I really don't have enough words to thank you. The amazing people, each one of you, and together. And I hope we continue to work together. You have so much to say and to give the world. So, well, with all my heart, we simply continue, huh? Take care.